All right, so today we're going to be looking at multiplying and dividing fractions. So at the top, you have 5 things to help you through the problems. Number 1 is that common denominators are not needed. 2, always change mixed numbers to improper fractions. 3, cancel or reduce between numerators and denominators if you can, and that is optional. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. 4, when you multiply, it's numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. And 5, to divide, you change the division sign to multiplication. You invert, which also means to flip the second fraction, and you multiply just like you do in step 4. So our first problem says negative 2/3 times 4/5. So I'm going to multiply numerator times numerator. So negative 2 times a positive 4 will give us negative 8. And 3 times 5 gives us 15. That's already in simplest form. Nothing can divide into both 8 and 15, so I'm just going to leave it the way it is. I also cannot cross cancel on this one, so I'm just going to go ahead and cross it out. For our next example, we have negative 3 1/5 times negative 2 3/4. So if you look back at your steps, it says to change mixed numbers to improper fractions. So 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. So I have negative 16 over 5 times 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 is 11. So negative 11 over 4. And we're first just going to multiply straight across. So negative 16 times negative 11 is going to give us positive 176. And 5 times 4 gives us 20. I'm now going to change that to a mixed number so I can put it in simplest form. So I'm going to divide 20 into 176. 20 can divide into 176 8 times. That would give us 160, and I'd be left with 16. So our whole number would be 8. 16 is my numerator, 20 is my denominator. Now I can also simplify 16/20. So I know that 2 goes into both 6 and 20 because they're even numbers, but I can also divide 4 into 16 and 20. So I'm going to divide both of these by 4, and that is going to give us 8 4/5. Now, if you don't want to simplify so much at the end, you can cross cancel. So you're still going to change these to improper fractions. So we would have negative 16 over 5 times negative 11 over 4. And when I cross cancel, I'm looking at the numbers diagonally to find a factor for both of those. So negative 16 and 4 go together, and 5 and negative 11 go together. Now 5 and 11 are both prime numbers. Nothing is going to divide into them except themselves, so 5 and 11 and 1. But 16 and 4 are both divisible. They're divisible by 2 and they're divisible by 4. So I'm going to choose the greatest common factor, and that would be 4. So I'm going to divide both of those numbers by 4. So 16 divided by 4 is going to give us 4. So we have negative 4. Denominator stays the same. Negative 11 stays, but 4 divided by 4 gives us 1. And once I cross cancel, I'm just going to multiply straight across. So negative 4 times negative 11 is positive 44 over 5. 5 divides into 44 8 times. We would have 4 left. 5 stays our denominator. So 8 4/5. All right, for our next example, we have 4 times 3/8. So I'm going to write this as a fraction. So I'm going to set the 4 over 1 times 3/8. And I'm just going to multiply straight across. So 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 8 is 8. I change it into a mixed number, so 8 goes into 12 one time. I would have 4 left over and 8 stays the denominator. Both 4 and 8 are divisible by 4. So 4 goes into 4 one time, 8 two times, which would make our answer 1.5. All right, I can also look to cross cancel here. So 4 over 1 times 3 over 8. So I'm going to look between the numbers diagonally. So I have 1 and 3. Nothing can divide into both 1 and 3 except for 1, so I'm going to leave them the same. And then I have 4 and 8. And both of those are divisible by 4. So 4 divides into 4 one time. So I get 1 over 1 times 3 over 2. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. And that would simplify to 1.5. So 3 over 2 or 1.5. All right, next we're going to divide. So let's look back at rule number 5. It says to divide, change the division sign to multiplication, then flip the second fraction and multiply as you do in step 4. So if I look at this, I'm essentially keeping the first fraction. I am changing my division to multiplication. And then I'm flipping the second fraction. So an easy way to remember this is to keep, change, flip. So my first fraction stays 3 over 10. I change my division to multiplication. And then I flip that second fraction. All right, and then I multiply straight across. So 3 times 9 is 27. 10 times 2 is 20. And this would be negative 27 over 20, which would also simplify to negative 1 and 7/20. All right, let's see if we could cross cancel anywhere here. So I had 3/10 times negative 9 over 2. So when you are dividing, before you cross cancel, you have to keep, change, flip. That should be the first thing you do. Then we're going to check if we can cross cancel. So I'm looking between 3 and 2 and 10 and 9. Now if I look at 3 and 2, nothing goes into those except for 1. And 10 and 9 are the same thing. There's no common number that can be divided. So I cannot cross cancel on this one. All right, moving on. So we have 5 and 1/4 divided by 4 and 2/3. So let's change these to improper fractions. And then I'm going to keep, change, flip. And you can multiply straight across. And you should get 1 and 1/8. All right, let's see if we could cross cancel anything here. So I'm going to write down after I've keep, change, flip. And I'm going to look between 4 and 3 and 21 and 14. All right, so there's nothing that can go into both 4 and 3 because 3 is a prime number. But between 21 and 14, they're both divisible by 7. So if I wanted to simplify this first, I'd divide by 7, which would give us 3/4. 3/4 times 3/2, which would give us 9/8, which simplifies to 1 1/8. All right, go ahead and pause the video. I want you to try the next 2 problems on your own, and then press play when you finish to see if you get the correct answers. All right, for the first one, you should have gotten positive 21. And then for the second one, positive 3/20. Be careful when you set these up, because if you get a negative over a negative, remember a fraction also means division. So a negative divided by negative is a positive. So our final answer would be positive. So just make sure you're watching those signs there.